We're supposed to say, got it. Okay.
Put
Got
it
it.
there. Got it.
Got it. There we go.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our special presentation tonight. On behalf of Biblical Seminary of the Philippines, a doctoral program, and Asia Graduate School of Theology, we're happy to present to you one of the world's foremost psychodynamic, psychoanalytic thinkers and authors and practitioners. So let me immediately go into a brief. If you go to her whole resume, it would take me a half hour. So I have a brief one here that I'm just going to read and then make a couple of comments. Martha Stark, MD, a graduate of Harvard Medical School and the Boston Psychoanalytic Institute, is a holistic, that is adult and child, psychiatrist and an innovative psychoanalyst. She is a faculty member at Harvard Medical School and an award-winning author of 9 highly acclaimed books. Here's one of them right here because we use this in our program for years. And actually, here's another one that goes with it. And now these are earlier books and there's others since then that she will probably talk about. 9 highly acclaimed books on the integration of psychodynamic theory into clinical practice, several of which have been required reading, like in our courses in Psychoanalytic Training Institutes and psychodynamic psychotherapy programs in the US, that's in the US, and Asia, that's us, and around the world. Now, just on a personal note, I want to say a couple of things. This is very unique, and she's a very unique person because she has the ability to take the very complex and difficult psychological psychoanalytic material, i.e. reading Fairbairn, reading Kohut, reading Kernberg, and she doesn't make it simple, but she makes it understandable. And there's a big difference. In other words, she takes theories and techniques from other analytic thinkers and herself and makes them human and personal in ways that we can use them in our work. And we in our program are discovering that as we go week by week in our supervision. Lastly, most importantly, she cares about people. I've sat under, now this is personal, I have sat under almost all the big names over the last 50 years in psychoanalytic thinking. And considering all of them, she is my number one in terms of caring for people. We have never met face to face, Martha, but I already consider you a friend. So that's the introduction. A couple of things. Everybody, please mute. You've got to mute. We can't have dogs barking or roosters crowing or all of that, that kind of thing. And
Bill, could I ask, please, maybe Greg, I see on my screen, because I'm co-host, people coming into the waiting room. It's flashing across my screen. So maybe Greg could make it so that even though I'm co-host, I don't have to see that. It obscures my view, actually. Yeah.
okay,
Can you, is it a window or is it just going across the top? Of your
It's going across. 2 people entered the waiting room, view and a little X. And I have to keep clicking the X because it's covering your faces.
Oh, I see.
And I think there is a way to do it.
is one of them Furman?
Yes, Furman, yes, entered.
Okay, they're up there.
Only the moment, but there'll be someone
That's-
else in a moment
That
because
waiting room, yeah.
Okay.
Lanny now entered.
Okay, we need to keep the waiting room open then.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not-
Yes, but again, it's obscuring my view. I wonder if I can get it down the side instead of just obscuring my frontal view here because I can't see you guys.
Let's
Um,
see.
Waiting room, there's a new one, yeah.
Well,
Let me see. Sorry for the delay, folks. Let's see.
it's supposed.
Greg, what might I push down here in terms of my own view?
Well, these participants are supposed to be added automatically.
Oops.
Let's see if you go to the bottom. If you hit the thing that says
Oh, dear.
participants.
Okay.
And there's a little screen pop up that says participant 61.
All right, let's see. Participant 61, yes.
What happens when you close that window? Of the little, well, I don't know what operating system you're using. Is that,
What's an operating system? I sure hope that's not being recorded. What's an operating system?
no, that's okay. If you can close that window, does that stop the pop-ups from appearing at the top? When you click on participants,
No, Jerry entered the waiting room.
yeah.
It's,
Yeah, this is supposed to be allowing people in automatically, admitting them. I don't know why that's popping up. I'll see if I can take care of it as soon as it pops up, so it's not in your way.
well, an alternative would be for the names instead of my being able to see, and obviously we can edit this out of the recording, instead of my being able to see, it obscures, I can't see your faces when it keeps popping up. And so can I put my faces along the side so I don't have to, it doesn't interrupt my frontal view here?
Yeah, there are, we have them on the side, yes.
I'd rather be on this.
View, Dr. Martha, you have to click view and click side by side gallery
Yes.
View.
on
PowerPoint?
upper right.
That's
You
what-
see
that's
like
what
there's
we're
a
offering.
view.
And just do.
There.
I don't, it keeps popping
Because
up.
the control is on your computer. Okay.
Well, on my computer up top, there's a picture of an Apple PowerPoint edit view, but I don't think you mean that.
No, it's on Zoom.
On Zoom, so I have a little panel along the bottom, remote control apps, more. I do have participants, there's 67, security, show, stop video
it's
mute.
this side or mine is on the right side. I mean, there's like a view. You have to click that where all our pictures, faces are.
I'm so sorry.
that,
I mean, I
like-
do understand. I've seen the word view before. I'm not seeing it now. Well, maybe I'm just going to pretend I don't see it. I can't see you guys because it keeps happening because people are coming and going, which they get to be. Well, let's see. Hide thumbnail video, show active speaker video, show thumbnail video, and show grid video. Are those relevant?
No. It's just on the.
Jerry's coming in.
Maybe I'll pause recording first.
Recording. Okay,
Is your phone?
all right, good. Questions and answers, they will not be doing the presentation. Perhaps at the end, we'll have some time to deal with those. Now, we will be covering for the 5th class in June, we'll be covering her works, The Ruthless Hope and The Failure to Grieve. You're reading that now, and we will cover that. We'll also be covering this presentation that you're about to receive. And there's going to be a presentation on insight, which is an excellent one. So now those of you who are in the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st cohorts, if you want to tune in during the first 2 weeks of June when we're covering Dr. Martha's material, you can do that as long as we can get someone to Zoom for you. Okay, so without any further ado, Dr. Martha, it's all yours.
Well, listen, I am so delighted to be here. Bill, working with you has just been an absolute delight, and you have framed this beautifully. So I have been very excited, and I've spent a lot of time sort of pulling together a lot of material. It's a lot, and some of it is so new that even I haven't thought it quite yet. It's sort of the unthought known. But anyway, so here we go. The therapeutic use of optimal stress to provoke recovery. No pain, no gain. And since we're starting 10 minutes late, I'm just fine with going 10 minutes over if that's okay with everybody else. So
Absolutely, yes.
okay, good. Okay. No pain, no gain. And, a slightly apologetic but smiley face there.
Martha, I need to interject
Yeah.
one thing.
That's okay.
By the way, everybody, Dr. Stark is doing this at no cost to us. A person of her caliber usually comes at a very high price. She has said no, she wants to do it pro bono. So just to add that in.
Ah, thank you. Okay. Okay. So I did written a book, The Transformative Power of Optimal Stress, from cursing the darkness, which is the defensive reaction, not so good, to lighting a candle, which is the more healthy adaptive response. So we're going to be talking about going from defensive reaction to adaptive response. All right. Therapeutic modalities that have deep and enduring psychodynamic change as their ultimate goal. For example, psychoanalysis and other depth psychologies, including, but not limited to, acceptance and commitment therapy, internal family systems, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy, accelerated experiential dynamic psychotherapy, emotional freedom techniques, neurolinguistic programming, sensory motor psychotherapy, Pat Ogden's, somatic experiencing, Peter Levine's, and psychomotor psychotherapy, Al Peso, with whom I trained. I adore him. All right, must ultimately be able to transform psychological rigidity into psychological flexibility, in the evocative words of ACT, or low-level defense into higher level, more evolved defense, in the more traditional words of psychoanalysis and ego psychology. That's the overarching what we're wanting to accomplish when we're thinking about deep, profound, sustained, structural, characterological, psychodynamic change, such that the patient, whatever her starting point, whatever her initial level of functionality, whatever her diagnosis, I'm so not interested in diagnosis. In an initial session with the patient, sometimes I can, if need be, I can come up with a diagnosis. But once I get to know the patient, I wouldn't even begin to know what their diagnosis is, because there are all sorts of multi-tiered, many levels, so complex. I would never think to say, well, they're clearly narcissistic personality. So mine is all about the process, and really not so much at all about specific diagnoses. Okay, such that the patient, whatever the starting point, will become ever better able over time, and it'll never be a straight line progression from this to this, but rather a series of disruptions, repairs, iterative healing cycles that will get the person from rigidity to flexibility. Such that over time, ever better able over time to manage the myriad stressors in her life to which she is being continuously exposed, ever more adept at responding adaptively and mindfully, instead of reacting defensively and mindlessly. The ultimate goal of deep treatments, then, is ever less psychological rigidity and ever more psychological flexibility. So, overview. In order to advance the patient, this is a heavy slide, from rigid defense to more flexible adaptation, against a backdrop of empathic attunement, empathic resonance, the therapist will repeatedly and judiciously offer the patient optimally stressful interventions. In other words, just the right balance between challenge and support, which is what we'll be talking about over the course of the morning or evening, strategically designed to generate destabilizing internal tension and homeostatic imbalance by juxtaposing in an embodied, lived fashion anxiety-provoking challenge of the defense with anxiety-assuaging support of it, thereby creating growth-incentivizing mismatch experiences, the working through of which, in order to resolve the internal tension and restore the homeostatic balance, will advance the patient to ever higher and ever more evolved levels of resilience and adaptive capacity. In other words, from rigid defense to more flexible adaptation. This is a heavy slide overview. We'll be coming back to the specifics over the course of our time. But yes, strategically designed, these growth incentivizing, growth promoting, destabilizing, optimally stressful interventions that will be juxtaposing something that causes more anxiety with something that causes less anxiety. So basically, we're going to be leveraging the patient's anxiety and using that, the fulcrum, that there as sort of at the heart of the therapeutic action, creating growth incentivizing mismatch experiences, the working through of which will advance the patient to ever higher levels. That was an overview. You're not expected to understand all of that. All right. Oh, a mismatch experience, just to kind of emblazon it in your brain. There's a mismatch experience. All right, so more specifically, optimally stressful interventions will alternately and repeatedly, first, a la Salman Akhtar's concept of disruptive attunement, challenge the defense by directing the patient's attention to where she isn't, but where the therapist would want her to go. And then support the defense by resonating empathically with where the patient is. Salman Akhtar's homeostatic attunement. Both are instances, examples of attunement. One is more homeostatic, the other disruptive. In essence, the therapist will be generating destabilizing tension within the patient by first increasing her anxiety with challenge and then decreasing it with support, and then up, down, or down, up, down, up, but alternately, repeatedly, up, down, when you can, when the moment is right. Not everything out of your mouth does it. You set this up by way of minimally stressful interventions, but that's not specifically our topic tonight, this morning. All right, so strategic leveraging of the patient's anxiety, alternately increasing it by challenging the defense, the dysfunctional defense, the rigid defense, the less healthy defense, whereas an adaptation will be more healthy, and then decreasing it by supporting the defense to incentivize transformation and growth. In essence, psychodynamic psychotherapy, psychoanalytic psychotherapy affords the patient both impetus, pressure, and opportunity, albeit belatedly, to master traumatic experiences, traumatic as opposed to optimal, traumatic experiences, traumatically stressful experiences that had once been overwhelming and therefore defended against, but that can now, with the benefit of the therapist's loving support and by tapping into the patient's underlying resilience, innate capacity to adapt to stress, and intrinsic striving towards health. This is fundamentally a really positive way of looking at people, our patients, us, all of us, that we have an underlying resilience, inborn, innate, inherent, intrinsic striving towards health. And it'll be the synergy of the external provision of support by the therapist, both the backdrop of empathic attunement and the optimally stressful interventions that challenge, but also support. And it'll be the synergy of external provision, environmental provision, a la Winnicott, and the internal resources, the internal reserves of the patient, such that as a result of that, these traumatic experiences can be revisited, reprocessed, and reframed. I don't know where that came from. Revisited, reprocessed, and reframed such that growth impeding defenses, once necessary for survival, can be gradually transformed into growth promoting adaptations. And there are different ways to describe this. One is from same old narratives to something new, different, and better narratives. Those are my words. Or from the sobering reality of what is to the enlivening possibility of what could be. Again, the transformative process will get you from this to this through the cycles, iterative healing cycles, such that the patient will have become stronger at the broken places. Ernest Hemingway, the world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are strong at the broken places. Well, it doesn't kill you. Makes you stronger. I don't know how they managed to get that one, but I love it. All right. They say that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. If that's the case, then I will be expecting my superpowers and new cape any day now. And people who know me know that I'm like crazy about the Minions. I just love the Minions. Like sometimes I just sit at my computer and I just like watch the Minions. We all have a little something that we do. That's my thing. All right. So how are defenses here being defined? Now, let me just ask, I'm sorry, like Greg, did I put that red mark on my screen here? I think maybe I did. I don't really like it exactly, but I guess it's here to stay. Okay, so if anybody can get rid of it, Greg, that'd be great. How are defenses here being defined? All right. Please note, I do not limit defenses to the well-known and more traditional ones. At one end of the continuum, low-level defenses, repression, regression, denial, dissociation, displacement, projection, isolation of affect, intellectualization, reaction, formation. And at the other end, higher level or more mature defenses that are more adaptive and more socially acceptable. For example, sublimation, humor, altruism, humility, positive identifications. I don't limit defenses to these more sort of standard ones. Rather, I define defenses more broadly as speaking to any of the self-protective mechanisms that we mobilize when made anxious in the face of stressors, psychological, physiological, and energetic. At one end of the continuum, what happens reflexively when we are confronted with stressors that overwhelm us with anxiety. And I always think when the stressor is too much, and I sort of go up in a high-pitched voice and I go up on my toes when I think in terms of stressors that overwhelm us with anxiety, to which I refer as low-level defenses or rigid defenses. And at the other end of the continuum of these self-protective mechanisms, what happens more reflectively, so not reflexive, knee-jerk reactivity, but more reflectively, more mindfully, when we're confronted with stressors that we are more easily able to take in our stride. Again, we want to get from the one to the other through these healing cycles. At one end, defensive reactions, at the other end, adaptive responses. Either we, made anxious, react to stressors by defending, whatever our diagnosis. So it's about stressors. Either we react defensively or we respond adaptively. More healthily if we respond adaptively, less healthily, more rigidly if we knee-jerk, mindlessly react defensively. Either we, made anxious, react to stressors by defending, defensive reaction, or we, more resilient, respond to stressors by adapting, adaptive response. Life is not about defensively waiting for the storm to pass, but about adaptively learning to dance in the rain. So what's the relationship between defense, defensive reaction to stressor, and adaptation, adaptive response to stressor? The relationship between defense and adaptation is a yin-yang relationship. These self-protective mechanisms are complementary, not opposing forces. Furthermore, all defenses have an adaptive component, of course, just as all adaptations serve a defensive function. Nonetheless, and more generally, although defenses might once have been necessary for the patient to survive, as rigid defenses become upgraded to more flexible adaptations, the patient becomes ever better able to thrive. The therapeutic action is indeed designed to transform rigidity into flexibility and surviving into thriving. Surviving to thriving. Now, dramatic demonstration of the direct relationship between flexibility and thriving. Decades ago, two obstetricians made an intriguing discovery about the paradoxical, counterintuitive relationship between regularity of fetal heart rate and fetal mortality. They discovered that, counterintuitively, the more metronome-like the heartbeat, lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, dub, the less likely the fetus would be to survive. Whereas the greater the heart rate variability, lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, lub, dub, lub, dub, the more likely the fetus would be to thrive. In other words, variability, adaptability, flexibility, resilience, and Tom Brady's pliability. I mean, I'm from New England, so, Tom Brady. Tom Brady's pliability are critically important for the health of both body and mind. We cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose how we cope with it, find meaning in it, and move forward with renewed purpose. Now, this next quote, everybody attributes to the existential psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. Apparently, he didn't really say it, but I needed to put that so you would know that I knew that most people think he said this. Between stimulus and response is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I would want to kind of reframe that as between the stressor and what follows is a space. And in that space is our power, either to react defensively by wallowing in our despair and abnegating responsibility for our lives, or to respond adaptively by acknowledging that despite our despair, from this point forward, the meaning we make of our lives is entirely up to us. Not only do we have the freedom to create that meaning, but we also have the responsibility to do so. It has been suggested that 10% of what happens to us is life, but 90% is how we react less healthily or respond more healthily to it. Between stressor and what follows is a space. My paraphrase. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose what we will do. We can either react defensively or respond adaptively. Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you, Sartre. Carl Jung. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. When I let go of the same old that I am, and I let go of what I am, I become the something new, different, and better that I might be. I become what I might be. And that, I think, is what deep, sustained psychodynamic change makes possible. So what is meant by controlled damage to jumpstart healing? So just as a field of grass can be burned in order to stimulate it to grow back, greener, healthier, and more lush than before, so too, controlled damage to the body can provoke the healing cascade. In the physiological realm, superimposing, and here are many examples, I'm going to read them to you because I'm sure you're familiar with most of them. All of them involve superimposing an acute physical injury on top of a chronic one. That, in essence, is what I think psychodynamic psychotherapy does. We, with our optimally stressful, growth incentivizing interventions, we will be superimposing an acute injury on top of a chronic one. All right, superimpose, but I'm jumping ahead. So physiologically, in superimposing an acute physical injury on top of a chronic one is sometimes exactly what the body needs in order to heal. So examples: high intensity interval training, intermittent fasting, ischemic preconditioning, intermittent hypoxic training, hyperbaric oxygen, homeopathy, vaccines and other immunotherapies, medicinal plants, dermabrasion, Fraxel laser treatments, radiofrequency microneedling, PRP, platelet-rich plasma, platelet-rich fibrin, PRF. I actually, this may be TMI, but quite frankly, I had some injected into my scalp, some platelet-rich fibrin in order to sort of regenerate some of my not as healthy hair follicles. And so you impose, put an injury, controlled damage to stimulate the body's healing cascade. And it helped somewhat. All right, vampire gum rejuvenation, Botox, stem cell facelifts, ECT, transcranial magnetic stimulation, defibrillation, cardiac defibrillation, pulse wave therapies, acupuncture, acupressure, cupping, red light therapy, infrared saunas, cryotherapy, brain teasers, and mental exercises. When the body is optimally challenged, no matter how compromised it might be in its functionality, adaptive recovery will be triggered because of the body's innate resilience. So here are two wonderful little examples here. Depriving yourself of half a night's sleep once a week. So preferably the second half of the night, for example, from 3 to 7 a.m. can produce a rapid, even if short-lived, restabilization of mood and recovery from depression. The thought is that the stress of disrupting or interrupting normal sleep patterns may force resynchronization of disturbed circadian rhythms. Intermittent fasting. I do this sometimes. I used to do it once a week. I don't do it as often anymore. I should, but a 36-hour water fast once a week. So for example, from after dinner on Monday evening. So I would do it starting at say 9 o'clock on Monday evening to before breakfast on Wednesday morning. So until 9 a.m. Wednesday morning. Sorry, that's the bugs. Can so significantly reduce the total body burden that mental clarity and focus can be improved dramatically and a sense of overall well-being restored. Intermittent fasting is also associated with increased levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, depleted levels of which are thought to be associated with depression. Interestingly, the only type of calorie restriction diet that will not slow down your metabolism is intermittent fasting. Think about that. Oh, I'm never going to eat that much again. Oh, look, food. That's not necessarily related to anything, but I mean, I also like a little Dory there. All right. So more specifically, optimal challenge of the brain will sharpen mental acuity, decelerate cognitive decline, and combat the effects of aging on the brain. Just as athletes can improve their physical fitness by optimally challenging their bodies with physical exercise, so too all of us can improve our, excuse me, our brain fitness, by optimally challenging our minds with brain teasers. For example, mathematical puzzles, word games, crossword puzzles, logic problems, and memory challenges. Excuse me for the coughing. Down here, I'm down here in Florida for now, on the west coast of Florida, and we have this dreadful red tide. And so it's this toxic sort of thing that comes in the water, the Gulf of Mexico, and we're right on the Gulf of Mexico, and these gases and toxic fumes come in a little bit, even though, of course, we're keeping our windows and doors closed. So anyway, I'm reacting to that. Sorry about that. It's affecting my voice a little. Any mental exercise requiring deliberate and concentrated effort, for example, active repetition, focused attention, meditation, certainly, reflection, juggling, that's a good one, or learning any new skill or new language will promote mental agility and forestall the inexorable decline in mental capacity as we age. We're talking, of course, about optimal stress. In addition to puzzles and games, our brains will be stimulated whenever we're exposed to situations that are new, unusual, different, novel, or unexpected, when our daily routines are disrupted, or when we combine two senses, a form of cross-training for the brain, like simultaneously listening to music and smelling flowers, watching a sunset and tapping our fingers. Or this one, I've tried to do this one, I practically threw my brain off, like printing with one hand while cursive writing with the other. You should try that one. And when I tried juggling, I'm trying to do it, I practically sort of broke some windows throwing the thing out that way through the window. So I've decided to do the cursive with one hand and printing with the other. Tricky. So just as with the body, where a chronic condition might not heal until it is made acute, so too with the mind. Indeed, over time, I have come to appreciate that ongoing therapeutic provision of just the right combination of challenge and support, namely optimal stress, increasing anxiety, decreasing it, increasing it, decreasing it, increasing it, decreasing it, will sometimes be the destabilizing provocation needed, both to overcome the inherent resistance to change so frequently encountered in even our most well-intentioned patients, and to transform their defensive need to maintain things as they are, same old, into the adaptive capacity, right? Defensive need to adaptive capacity to evolve. It's an evolutionary process, cycles, to something new, different, and better. If you do not change direction, you may end up where you are heading. All right, neuroscientist. Oh, neuroscience. So much for that little typo. Charles Krebs writes, open, self-organizing, complex adaptive, in other words, chaotic systems resist perturbation, resist being disrupted. Examples of chaotic systems include road traffic, ocean turbulence, sand dunes, and what we're talking about here, the self-protective mechanisms, because defensive reactions and adaptive responses both are self-protective mechanisms mobilized by anxious patients, because it's a story about, as a therapist, keeping your fingers ever on the pulse of the level of the patient's anxiety, so that you can sort of figure out if you think they can tolerate more challenge or if they will need more support. But you're ever busy. Like I was taught that like decades ago, the importance of anxiety. And, you know, it's one of those things you learn and then you sort of, whatever, and you sort of forget about it until more recently, I sort of got it. This sort of like, wow, that is really important. We track that, the patient's level of anxiety, that we say something, do they react defensively or do they respond adaptively? Like that's both so simple, but profound, and something, you know, I wasn't aware of until suddenly I really sat and thought about it. And then I got it. All right. So, and the self-protective, yes, mechanisms mobilized by anxious patients desperately attempting to manage the stressors in their lives, whatever person's diagnosis, however old they are, if they had terrible trauma when they were a kid, if they don't have legs now, if they have cancer, if they're going to be dying, whatever, moment by moment, we are continuously exposed to a myriad of stressors, psychological, physiological, energetic. And what makes the difference is whether we can whether we react defensively, not so good, or respond adaptively. All right. So, which is to say that no matter how compromised the chaotic system or the self-organizing systems might be in their functionality, self-organizing systems, fueled as they are by their homeostatic tendency to remain constant over time, are inherently resistant to change. In other words, patients, much as they might protest their desire to change, have an innate inertia that must be overcome. Now, they do also have an innate resilience, yes, but they also have an innate inertia. And I hadn't quite fully realized this. Inertia means, well, if you're stopped, it's hard to get started. But it also means that if you started and you're going along, it's hard to stop. So inertia means changing from either stopping to starting or starting to stopping. Okay, so patients have an innate inertia that must be overcome if they are ever to be released energetically from the toxicity of their past. And you'll be hearing in a moment about my psychodynamic synergy paradigm, which has 5 modes of therapeutic action. And the 5th one is a quantum neuroscientific approach to advancing the patient from rigidity to flexibility. And in the 5th model, we talk much more about being released, quantum entanglement, and being released energetically from the toxicity of their past and empowered. So you have to overcome their innate inertia. And if they're ever to be released and empowered to embrace love, work, and play to their greatest potential going forward. A humorous example of resistance to change. A Saturday Night Live skit in which 2 men are seated around a fire chatting. And one says to the other, you know how when you stick a poker in the fire and leave it in for a long time, it gets really, really hot? And then you stick it in your eye and it really, really hurts. I just hate it when that happens. I just hate it when that happens. All right, resistance to change, repetition compulsion. Or the rock song by the late Warren Zevon entitled, If You Won't Leave Me, I'll Find Somebody Who Will, which speaks to the need we all have to recreate the, in the words of Stephen Mitchell, familial and therefore familiar, because that's all we've ever known. Having something different would create anxiety because it would highlight the fact that things could be and could therefore have been different. Okay. I am here reminded of Portia Nelson's autobiography in 5 short chapters, which highlights both our defensive need to maintain things as they are, same old, and our adaptive capacity ultimately to change. If there's a little noise in the background, could somebody make sure we're all muted here, please? Thanks. Yes, okay, so chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. All right, so ongoing and judicious use of optimally stressful therapeutic interventions must therefore offer patients, because of their innate resistance to change, these optimally stressful, growth incentivizing, destabilizing therapeutic interventions must therefore offer patients enough challenge that there will be impetus for destabilization of their dysfunctional defenses, but enough support that there will be opportunity for restabilization of those self-protective mechanisms at ever healthier levels of functionality and adaptability. Challenge support. I love this one. Indeed, we all find ourselves sometimes very confused about what to do next. Not quite sure what to do right now. Keep left, do not follow. I was so happy when I found that online. All right. So with the therapist's finger ever on the pulse of the patient's level of anxiety and capacity, therefore, to tolerate further challenge, the therapist will therefore repeatedly, I'm repeating what I'd said earlier, but this is at the heart of the therapeutic action, challenge whenever possible by directing the patient's attention to where the patient is not, but to where the therapist would want the patient to go, disruptive attunement, and support whenever necessary by resonating empathically with where the patient is. The example that Salman Akhtar gives, it's delightful. It's from a long time ago, and this is his example, and you know, it looks a little bit, well, you could think of it as being a little bit sexist, but let's not worry about that. That's his example, and it is what it is, and it's beautiful. And so the mother's at home with the little baby and during the day, and she's playing with the little baby, and the little baby is just having cooing and cawing. It's just wonderful, and they're enjoying themselves, and the little baby feels totally held. And this is homeostatic attunement. It's all good. It's all good. And then daddy comes home from work. Daddy comes home from work and he sees his little one there, and he goes over to the little one and he picks up the little one and he swings the little one around, and the little one squeals with delight. That's disruptive attunement. So it is still attuned. One is homeostatically and the other is disruptively. And I think that's a brilliant, I mean, everything Salman Akhtar, everything out of his mouth is brilliant. And that's a beautiful distinction that he makes. And it's relevant for our work as well, because we will alternately direct the patient's attention to where we want her to go. I mean, not just sort of like, well, what do you think of the sky, but related to what's going on. And then we will alternately resonate empathically with where the patient is. Increase the anxiety, decrease it, increase, decrease. Just the right doses of challenge and support to catalyze, another good word, incentivize growth, dosed stimulation in essence. So it could be said that, yeah, without support, therapy never begins, but without challenge, therapy never ends. Alternatively, we could say, well, without challenge, therapy never begins, but without support, therapy never ends. And I'm guessing that both, all of those make sense for you. By the same token, this perhaps more familiar to you, it could be said that without empathy, therapy never begins. Excuse me, but without empathic failure, therapy never ends. Or without empathic failure, therapy never begins, but without empathy, therapy never ends. In essence, without sufficient challenge, there will be no impetus for growth. I mean, the patient may feel better. Like one of my mentors was wont to say, if the patient asks you where the bathroom is, you can tell them, but don't call it therapy. So, I mean, you can gratify and you can do stuff, and that's all good. And with some patients, for whatever complex mix of reasons, I mostly support, because I'm getting it, fingers ever on the pulse of the level of their anxiety, that sadly, for whatever complex mix of reasons, in our relationship, they're not quite yet, or in their lives or in our relationship, they're not quite yet able to tolerate the challenge, an optimally stressful challenge. But for the most part, with all of my patients, for the most part, I do optimal challenge of them. It is true. All right. The moral of the story: you need to provide both challenge and support from beginning to end. All right. In other words, it's not so much empathy as empathic failure against a backdrop of empathy, known to, right, self-psychology and all of us, optimal disillusionment, or optimal responsiveness. Howard Bacall talks about that. It is not so much gratification as frustration against a backdrop of gratification, optimal frustration, also optimal responsiveness. It is not so much support as challenge against a backdrop of support, optimal stress. That will, and Hans Selye, of course, talked about eustress, EUSTRESS, as opposed to distress. And I'm talking about optimal stress as opposed to traumatic stress, and versus no stress at all. It is not so much support as challenge against a backdrop of support that will provide the therapeutic leverage needed to provoke alternating cycles of destabilization and then restabilization at ever more robust levels of adaptive capacity. Deep and enduring psychodynamic change requires this ongoing generation of destabilizing anxiety and incentivizing stress. And so think about it. In your sessions with your patients, are there times when you actually, because you're going to be leveraging their anxiety, make them a little bit anxious? I hope so. Right. And sometimes I know that when I teach, or some of my students or supervisees, they'll say, oh, I'm not sure I could say that because it might make the patient anxious. They're like, yeah, maybe it will. But as long as you're right there with them, I mean, you're just like right there with them, then you can do something in the way of support. And again, with what you're going to be hearing about later, my optimally stressful interventions in the 5 different modes of therapeutic action, we will be ever busy and getting both sides done. So down, up, down, up, down, up. And as you will see, it's not just going to be down, up, down, up, down, up, which is why the Chinese proverb, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. That's great, but that doesn't really do justice, because it's fall down and then stand up at a slightly higher level, stand a little taller, and then fall down again, and then stand up a little taller still because of the synergy. Remember that synergy between the external provision, environmental provision, and your internal reserves, the patient's internal reserves, such that they end up better than where they had been, but through a series of iterative, right, getting ever closer to healing cycles. All right. And these optimally stressful interventions that create mismatch experiences by juxtaposing two things, old, bad, new, good, same old, something new, different, and better, there and then, here and now, traumatic, optimal, any number of the juxtapositions. We'll say more about that. And neuroscience tells us a little bit about therapeutic memory reconsolidation, but I'm not going to get into that quite yet. But anyway, so if you're patient, I hope that over the course of a session, you have made your patient anxious sometimes. And I hope that sometimes they experience you in the transference as a bad object. I hope so, because that's going to give them all sorts of opportunity. And if all you are is nicey nice and empathic and it's all good and supportive, sometimes maybe that's all that the patient can tolerate, maybe all that you can tolerate. But that's not a story about deep, enduring, psychodynamic, characterological, structural change, by the way. Okay, so again, deep and enduring psychodynamic change requires this ongoing. It doesn't mean that, again, every sentence out of your mouth needs to be but at the end of the day, and even in the middle of the day, ongoing generation of destabilizing anxiety and incentivizing stress. And again, I'm not emphasizing it here, but minimally stressful interventions are interventions that sort of set the stage and create the backdrop and lay the foundation for, by identifying and naming some of the critically important players and actors and so on. And then you'll pluck two of them, juxtapose them with some optimally stressful interventions. You don't quite understand what I mean yet because I haven't explained enough. I hope this is an optimal stress. So you're feeling a little bit anxious, but oh, thank you for the smile there, Booty. Anyway, a little bit stressed, a little bit, but confident that you're going to, feeling better by the time we're done here. All right. So let's see. So judicious use of optimal stress provides both impetus and opportunity for the patient to evolve through healing cycles of disruption and recovery from illness to wellness. Oh, I was talking to my dear sweet Gunnar. He's my life partner of 45 years. And I talked to him. He's not in the field, but he's so brilliant. I have to run everything by him. And he said, oh, like on shampoo bottles, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. And in essence, that's what we're doing. Challenge, support, repeat, challenge, support, repeat, challenge, support, repeat. All right. Now, how does the sandpile model of chaos theory offer a compelling visual for the evolution of the patient through iterative? It took me a while to understand the difference between iterative and recursive, but I've come to understand this is iterative. We're getting ever closer to where we want to go. I think I have that right. Through iterative healing cycles. Well, let me start again. How does the sandpile model of chaos theory offer? I don't begin to understand chaos theory, but understand a little bit of it. The sandpile model of chaos theory offer a compelling visual for evolution of the patient through iterative healing cycles of destabilization, followed by restabilization at ever more evolved levels of complexity and dynamic balance. As a result of the cumulative, over time, impact of optimally stressful interventions. Let's see if I can put my money where my mouth is here. The paradoxical impact of stress. So the sandpile model of chaos theory, and I'm somebody who's noticed this parallel, and now other people kind of talk about it too. So the sandpile model of chaos theory offers an elegant visual demonstration of the cumulative impact over time of environmental stressors on open systems like people. Think hourglass. So think of an hourglass. I use this with grains of sand. I use this sandpile model, which simulates the evolution over time of open, self-organizing, chaotic systems, like the stock market, neural networks, hurricanes we talked about earlier, as an analogy for the iterative healing cycles of disruption and repair, destabilization and restabilization that characterize the therapeutic action in psychodynamic psychotherapy. The sand pile model of chaos theory, iterative cycles of destabilization and restabilization at ever higher levels of complexity and dynamic balance, a compelling visual for the cumulative impact of optimal stress on both mind and body. So before I give it away in the next slides, just note that these environmental stressors, the grains of sand or salt, whatever in this hourglass, are steadily being added, and the sand pile is gradually evolving and getting ever bigger. But inevitably, we don't know when, we just know that there will come a time when one of the or several of the grains of sand will prompt a minor avalanche, say the chaos theorists, a minor avalanche, such that there'll be a partial of the grains of sand. But then the ongoing addition of the grains of sand will then be the means by which the sand pile builds itself back up. Now, is that like beautiful or what? I mean, I almost start crying when I say that because I just love it so much as an analogy. I thought it was metaphor, but again, my dear sweet Gunnar said, no, it's not a metaphor, it's an analogy. So anyway, that's an analogy for the therapeutic action in psychodynamic psychotherapy. Also, my dear sweet Gunnar, speaking of my Gunnar, sometimes if I'm, having a fit about something, he will say, he's just a sweet, kind, dear, gentle man. And he'll come and he'll say, now, he said, remember, you want to be lighting a candle and not cursing the darkness. And it's always touche, fair enough. All right, so here we go. The paradoxical impact of stress. Both the sand pile model and the therapeutic action feature the emergence, right? Chaotic systems, emergence of certain properties, the emergence over time, evolutionary, of iterative cycles of destabilization, which is a defensive reaction to the challenge, and restabilization, an adaptive response to the support. As these chaotic systems, both the sand pile and the therapeutic action, evolve to ever more richly textured layers of resilience, complexity, integration, and dynamic balance, not just in spite of environmental stressors, but by way of those stressors. Not in spite of, but by way of those stressors. Now, how is it that ongoing evolution is possible, not just in spite of, but because of the cycles of disruption and repair? Amazingly enough, the grains of sand being steadily added to the gradually evolving sand pile, much like the optimally stressful interventions that we offer our patients, are the occasion for both disruption and repair. Not only do the grains of sand, optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences that we create with our optimally stressful interventions that juxtapose two things that are seemingly irreconcilable entities, thesis, antithesis, ultimately a synthesis. Let's not worry about that. Not only do the grains of sand periodically precipitate partial collapses of the sand pile, destabilization of the patient's defenses, described as minor avalanches in chaos theory, but they also become the means by which the sand pile, the patient's infrastructure, will then be able to build itself back up, its structural integrity reinforced, each time at a more resilient level of homeostasis. The system, the patient, will therefore have been able not only to manage the impact of the stressful input, but also to benefit from that impact so that they will get better, not in spite of, not by going around, but by way of, not only just manage it, but benefit from that impact. So it's not just, I remember when I figured out, I'd been a therapist for a very long time before I really sort of got it that patients sort of get better as a result of input from the outside. So like, oh yeah, right. Yeah. But then it took me some more years and years to get it. They get better by way of optimally stressful input from the outside. All right. Oops, sorry. All right. So the system will therefore have been able not only to manage the impact, but also to benefit from that impact, from defensive collapse to adaptive reconsolidation at ever more robust levels. The irregularities in the sand pile, much like the scars we all bear, poignant reminders of the minor collapses, injuries we have all sustained over time, but ultimately triumphantly overcome. the art of precious scars, kintsukuroi, to repair with gold, the art of repairing pottery with gold or silver lacquer, and understanding that the piece is more beautiful for having been broken. Now, how does the Goldilocks principle highlight the critical role played by getting it just right with respect to exposure to stressors? So we don't want it to be too much traumatic, and not at all zero, but optimally. So let's see what we say. The Goldilocks principle, too much challenge will overwhelm and plummet the system, at least for the moment, into further decline, because it will be too much to be processed, integrated, and adapted to traumatic stress. Too little challenge will offer too little impetus and opportunity for transformation and growth, serving instead simply to reinforce the dysfunctional status quo. But just the right amount of challenge will provide just the right amount of therapeutic leverage needed to provoke, after initial disruption, eventual re-equilibration at a higher, more evolved level of integration, functionality, and adaptive capacity. Optimal, non-traumatic stress. Same thing, optimal, non-traumatic. And basically, I copied that out of self-psychology, and I put it here. All right, so Goldilocks principle. Too hot, too cold, just right. I've done this. Stress is when you wake up screaming and then you realize you haven't fallen asleep yet. I do see some smiles here. Yes, right. Yes. All right. So where does my psychodynamic synergy paradigm come into play? I'm also thinking, I'm eyes on the time. I think what I want to do is present the next few slides, and then we take a little 5-minute break, and then we come back if that's okay with people. Okay. So my psychodynamic synergy paradigm come into play. It took me years to figure out what I wanted to call it. And then one day I was walking along the Charles River up there in Cambridge, where we live when we're not down here in Clearwater Beach. So we come down here for the winter, and then we go back up there for the summer. So I was walking along the Charles River, and it came to me, psychodynamic synergy, because it's pulling together and integrating. As it turns out, used to be 3, then it became 4, and then there were 5. And now there's a 6th one, but we don't need to get into that here because I haven't thought it all out yet. So where does my psychodynamic synergy paradigm come into play? Okay, so it features 5 interdependent, mutually enhancing, not mutually exclusive, mutually enhancing approaches to advancing the patient from rigid defense, same old, to more flexible adaptation, something new, different, and better. And let me say, it is sort of also about integration. Now, there are 2 ways to look at integration. I had always thought that integration, the way I was using integration was you have this, A, and you have B, and if you integrate them, then you have A, B, and possibly even the best of A and B, and now you have A, B. And you've integrated them. So things from A and things from B, you've integrated them, and now you have AB. But Dick Schwartz, internal family systems inventor, brilliant inventor, uses it a little differently. And so I had to sit down and talk with him, and just needed to understand it is a little different. And I love the way he uses the word. His thought here is, you got A, you got B. Think left side of the brain, right side of the brain. Think corpus callosum, the band of connective tissue connecting the left and the right sides of the brain. And when you integrate, or you have parts, for example, internal family systems, but when you integrate, that means that you have easier access to a more seamless flow of information and energy between A and B, like between the left and the right sides of the brain across the corpus callosum. So you left brain, sometimes right brain, left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain, which is interesting. So for me, with my psychodynamic synergy paradigm, I do like the word synergy, but I also think it's an integrative one, in the sense of there are these different approaches, but over in a session, and I can do it sort of okay sometimes, because I made these up, so I know them pretty well, although quite frankly even I sort of forget sometimes. Now, what was it? Oh yeah, that's right. But anyway, so a seamless back and forth in the session, moment by moment. It's not about the patient's diagnosis. It's about how different approaches to facilitating their evolving through iterative cycles, Sandpile model, chaos theory, from rigidity to more flexibility, and with a different focus in each of the 5. So model 1, I put those dates there because that's when I learned about the classical psychoanalytic theory. So do the math, and of course you're figuring out, of course, how old I am. And I said I was with my dear sweet Gunner for a certain amount of time. And so, just do the math here and whatever. Might as well just tell you how old I am, but whatever. Classical psychoanalytic, that's what I first learned about at the Boston Psychoanalytic Institute, very conservative. And we learned about that, and that's what we learned about then, and probably would still be learning about it. Oops. Anyway, so that's the, thank you, Bill, for your smile there. All right. Model 2, self-psychological. Then I came to understand in the 1980s. So like, oh, wow. I mean, that is like so cool, because empathic, like, oh, yes. I mean, empathic, absolutely. So model 1, kind of interpretive, more cognitive. Self-psychological, sort of more kind of empathic and affective and sort of heartfelt and experience near and all that good stuff. Then in the 1990s, sort of like, oh, the kind of cool people, really cool people, Owen Rennick and Stephen Mitchell and Jay Greenberg and Darlene Ehrenberg and the William Allenson White Institute, and sort of like contemporary relational, like, oh my God, this is so cool. Everything co-created, intersubjective approach to contemporary relational theory. I mean, this is just too cool. Then model 4, 2000 to 2010, whatever you call that decade. I keep forgetting what you call it, but that there, existential humanistic. And so that, quite frankly, by the way, the reason I got existential humanistic, see, model 1 is really about structural conflict. That's what Freud talked about, structural conflict. Model 2 is about structural deficit. Model 3, using Stephen Mitchell's term, is about relational conflict. And so my dear friend Larry Hedges out there in California, he, bless his dear soul, he knew my work well enough, my first 3 modes of therapeutic action, that he was, quite frankly, kind of in my face about, if I have structural conflict, structural deficit, relational conflict, I need to have relational deficit like Martha. I mean, one, you need to have it, and also for the symmetry, and just you need to have it. So anyway, he was in my face for a long time, and I finally, wanting to be flexible and not rigid, I finally said, okay. And of course, my whole thing is so much better as a result. And I sort of feel I have to go back and apologize to all my patients when I was really just working with the first 3 models and so on. But anyway, let's hope that intuitively I was doing model 4. So model 4 is relational deficit, existential humanistic, whatever. And then model 5 is the 2010 to 2020 quantum neuroscientific. And that's when, well, I'll get to that in a moment. And now just true confession, and I may regret saying this, but my model 6, so I have a decade, I need a decade for each to develop, would be 2020 to 2030. And my model 6 is going to be a holistic approach. And I've got all sorts of ideas. And people are so excited about that they keep wanting, forget the other 5. They want to know about the holistic one. And it's sort of like, wait a minute, I need 7 more years to develop it. But anyway, the 6th one will be more holistic, and model 7, so I better live to be pretty old, model 7 will be more spiritual, but yeah, that's right. Okay, so all 5 models make use of optimal stress, wouldn't you know it? Just the right balance between anxiety-provoking challenge and anxiety-assuaging support to catalyze transformation, rigid defense into more flexible adaptation. Now, so model 1, in essence, this, the interpretive perspective of classical psychoanalysis. Resistance, that's the defense, into, it would have been insight, Freud, whatever, but that doesn't start with an A, and I need my adaptations to start with an A. That's right. Thank you, Bill. So it's resistance into awareness. So you can accept that, awareness, insight, whatever. Model 2, the corrective provision or deficiency compensation perspective of self-psychology. Now we have relentless hope, or relentless pursuit of the unattainable. So relentless hope into acceptance. Sober, mature acceptance of the harsh reality that it was what it was, is what it is. So the defense is on the left side, and they all start with the letter R. They start with the letter R. So resistance into awareness, relentless hope into acceptance. Model 3, the intersubjective perspective where everything's co-created of contemporary relational theory, transference, countertransference, entanglements, mutual enactment, projective identification, et cetera, Now we have compulsive and unwitting reenactment, which is sort of the translating it into action, the repetition compulsion. So you're compulsively and unwittingly reenacting unmastered early on relational traumas on the stage of your life and in the treatment into accountability. So you're still going to sort of be doing some of this, but at least there's the capacity instead of the need, defensive need, adaptive capacity, instead of the need to be compulsively and so on, reenacting the unmastered relational traumas, now you have the capacity at least to hold yourself accountable for the part you're playing. All right, and model 4, an existential humanistic approach to disconnection from self, from the true self, the private self, the impenetrable self, and from life itself. Can you feel a little bit the existential humanistic piece here? Relational absence into authentic presence. So the R word into authentic presence. Or if I want to get sort of really quite erudite, because it is also sort of existential, we could say from nihilistic, that's an N, but whatever, nihilistic rejection of existence to existential acceptance, there's the A word, of its polarities, its dualities, its complementarities. So when you're talking more existential and fancy like, you can say that. But in any event, from retreat, relational absence to authentic presence and accessibility and availability. And model 5, a quantum neuroscientific approach to analysis paralysis. When the patient has awareness, they have acceptance, they have accountability, they have accessibility, and quite frankly, they're not doing anything. Analysis paralysis. And you have friends, we all have friends. They've been in analysis for years. They say, oh my God, I love my analyst. I love the work we're doing, whatever. Sort of like, and you look at them, they're still in the bad marriage, they're still in the bad job, there's still this, there's still that. So analysis paralysis, and now we talk about refractory, kind of a fancy dancy term, but it has to start with R, refractory inertia. And again, my dear sweet Gunnar came along and said, why don't you just call it rootedness to the spot? So, okay, rut or rootedness to the spot to actualizing action. Okay. And then here, oh yes, so only recently, and I think I'll do this in one more slide and then we'll take a 5-minute break. So this is actually, if I just stuck with the first 4 approaches, it's a care approach to deep healing. Cognitive, affective, relational, existential. Like who knew? So anyway, so model 1, cognitive enhancement of knowledge within. And again, I'm leaping way ahead here, but the working through will involve basically interpreting the internal or neurotic or intrapsychic conflictedness, the patient's ambivalence about stuff. Internal, they suffer, no one else, whatever. It's a one-person psychology and interpreting it. It's a cognitive interpreting, enhancement of knowledge within. Notice the prepositions. Model 2, more affective, this sort of self-psychological stuff. Now it's provision of experience 4. This is a 1.5-person psychology. The therapist is a sort of empathic self-object, half person there, or if you're having a good hair day, maybe it'll be 3/4 person, or if you're having a bad hair day, it's a 1/4 person. And the patient, the focus on the patient and the patient's affective experience. And this will involve, by being sort of creating an empathic attunement and being very present and there, ultimately, I believe it involves grieving disappointment, grieving disillusionment, or grieving relentless hope, my words. All right, model 3, relational. Engagement in relationship with. Working through involves, now I use Darlene Ehrenberg's beautiful term. She says intimate edge. I add negotiating the turbulence that will inevitably arise at the intimate edge of engagement, when there's as close to real as we can get engagement, projective identification, et cetera, and Darlene Ehrenberg, intimate edge. And model 4, nurturing of surrender to. This is the existential approach, CARE. Working through involves, Masood Khan, overcoming the dread of surrender to this beautiful term that Ofra Eshel, an Israeli analyst, uses, analytic oneness. And it just about is what you might imagine. So this involves, wanting to gain access to, well, the name of my book that's about model 4 is called Let's see if I can remember it. It's called A Heart Shattered, comma, the Impenetrable Self, comma, or the false, or the private self, comma, and a Life Unlived, colon, an existential humanistic approach to easing existential angst and reclaiming a life or something. I'm not sure. Anyway, to something. Relentless despair, I guess, is a relentless despair. Okay. And so Masood Khan talks about how important it is that in Model 4 that you be able to help the patient overcome their dread of surrender to resourceless dependence, is what he says, or Winnicott would have said absolute dependence. So way back, regress to redo. And I'm putting in from Ofra Eshel to analytic oneness, where the two are as one. So Model 1 is one person, Model 2 is 1.5 person, Model 3 is 2 person, Model 4 is 2 as 1, and Model 5 is I don't know. I'm still deciding how many people are involved in Model 5, but Model 5 will say constructivist. It's a little more directive. And I learned more about Model 5 by my immersion over the course of the last 10, 20, 30 years. Sort of privately, I went off and did this, and my psychoanalytic colleagues didn't really know that I was doing it, but I did, and learned short-term intensive work. And, you know, with Patricia Copeland, her ISTDP stuff, and Diana Fosha, AEDP, and learning the whole stuff with Al Peso back in the 1990s. Bessel van der Kolk, Pat Ogden, and I did the training up there in Strolling Woods, up there in New Hampshire, Vermont, whichever one that is. And it was an incredible experience. And I learned stuff from them that I had not been learning from the psychoanalytic training that I was getting. So I've put in Model 5, envisioning of possibilities beyond. It's a story about therapeutic memory reconsolidation. Working through involves disentangling, envisioning, and committing to action. According to Bruce Ecker, is one of the people who, whatever. So let's see. This is the last one. Then we are taking a 5-minute break. Ongoing and judicious use of optimally stressful growth incentivizing interventions, strategically designed to create destabilizing, disconfirmatory mismatch experiences. And I promise when we come back, I'm going to give you examples. So Model 1 is conflict statements. Model 2 are disillusionment statements. Model 3 are accountability statements. Model 4 are facilitation statements, facilitating environment, Winnicott also. And Model 5 are quantum disentanglement statements. All of them are going to create destabilizing, disconfirmatory mismatch experience, is the working through of which will enable the patient to advance from defense to adaptation. And notice the final thing here is the optimal stressor that's the cutting edge of the therapeutic work. All of them start with the second word, the letter D, which means that my approach, I love your smile, thank you there, Bill W. So which means then that my approach is, as somebody had to point this out to me, is RAD, R-A-D. The defense starts with R's, the adaptations start with A, and to get from the defense to the adaptation, you work through the stress of the optimal stressor of Model 1, cognitive dissonance, Model 2, affective or optimal disillusionment. Model 3, relational detoxification of the pathogenicity of the pathogenic interjects. Model 4 and so on. Model 4 is existential dependence. When I was working with Larry Hedges to kind of come up with the name of the optimal stressor, and I said to him, you know, it has to start with the letter D. It just has to. I'm not going to put in a Model 4. Being a little bit rigid, I do admit. And he was driving me to the airport, to LAX. So LAX is there, and we've already figured out that the R word, the defense, is retreat or relational absence, that the A word is authentic presence or accessibility. And I said to him, well, we need the optimal stressor to start with the letter D, or I'm not doing it. And so we're right there. I'm going to miss my plane. He said, no, we're going to get this. So we came up with, we said finally, okay, absolute dependence. And I said, okay, done. So I go home, and as soon as I get home, I write down what we've done, and it was pretty exciting. But then I thought, well, it's an existential humanistic approach, because that it is. And then I thought, I'm going to look up, quote, Google existential dependence. And lo and behold, it is exactly what we're talking about, whether it's resources dependence, Masood Khan, absolute dependence, Winnicott, or this here, or analytic oneness, Ifra Oshel. Existential dependence means depending upon another for one's very existence. Yes. And that's what we do in model 4. And then model 5, quantum disentanglement. All right, we're going to take, synergy. I so wanted this that I paid Shutterstock and to get this, because it's sort of a beautiful, captures the essence of. All right, so why don't we take a 5-minute break? So I have one of these sort of old-fashioned clocks, because if you're a certain age, you're allowed to still have these kinds of clocks. So the big hand is sort of about on a little past the 4. I mean, I don't know if you guys even know how to read these clocks still, but whatever. It's a little past the 4, and we'll go till, oh, you do. Thank you. We'll go for 5 minutes till it's a little bit past the 5, and then we'll resume. Okay? So good. And
Yes.
mutually enhancing. Good. So these models, so why don't, I guess we'll just sort of get started here. So these 5 modes of therapeutic action are all interdependent. They're mutually enhancing, not mutually exclusive. There are some elements shared by all, and then there's some things that distinguish, that are particular to each of the 5. So in a session, I will, and again, I'm not necessarily thinking, well, let's see. I guess I don't have it. Oh yeah, I don't have it here. All right. So here's, it depends upon which, I mean, I can only say one thing at a time when I'm with my patient. So I'm thinking maybe several models, but in that particular moment, and I do an intervention, I can sort of like only say, since I can't say 2 words at the same time. So the point of emotional urgency, moment by moment, or what's most emotionally fraught or affectively charged, will determine where in the moment I go, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, even though in the moment relevant may be 3 and 4, or 2 and 5, or all of them. But I will, in the moment, whatever feels most emotionally fraught is where I'll go, but with the thought that based on how the patient either reacts or responds, I'll then go to one of the others. And again, since I kind of created this system and made it up, for me, it's a little easier for me to sort of be thinking in these terms. But quite frankly, truth be told, there'll be whole sessions that go by, and the idea of model 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I wasn't even thinking it. I was just more in the moment and sort of feeling it. But what I do feel is, what I do take with me is the importance of keeping my fingers ever on the pulse of the level of the patient's anxiety, so that and if I'm especially tired, and I know when first the pandemic, 3 years ago now, 3+ years ago now hit, I mean, I couldn't even begin to do optimally stressful. I mean, we were just all trying to hang on. So I just we were supporting support. I did not do fabulous work in that first month or so. Or maybe a month or 2 or so. But when I'm, on, yes, optimally stressful and so on. All right, so let's resume. So but thank you, Bill. Right, we want to keep in mind all 5, and it's not about somebody's only something. All 5 on some level are operating almost simultaneously. How do optimally stressful interventions provide both challenge and support of defense? All right, so let's see. Okay, good. Whew. All right, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences. They're also called violations of expectation. They're also called prediction errors. And so let me just name this real quick. Like I keep kind of throwing out the word therapeutic memory reconsolidation, and the cognitive neuroscientists in their laboratories have figured this out. And then some of the sort of trailblazing neuroscientifically inclined psychotherapists like Bruce Ecker and David Feinstein, it corroborates and so on. The idea that if you repeatedly and forcefully juxtapose, in essence, for the moment, I'm going to say old bad with new good, old bad, same old narratives with new good, something new, different, and better narratives, back and forth, left, right, left, right, left, right, along the lines of think EMDR, dun, 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 that, bring to bear the analytic wisdom of your left brain on what you're experiencing in your right brain, put very simplistically. But the idea of juxtaposing rapidly, so you revisit, reactivate old bad, and that will, if you simultaneously introduce something that's discrepant, you will, the reconsolidation window will open up, and it lasts for like 4 to 6 hours, where there's opportunity to introduce something new. That is profound. So that in essence, I mean, technically, all of our therapy sessions should be 4 to 6 hours, I guess. And you just forcefully, repeatedly, dramatically, directly, left, right, left, right, left, right. And some of the short-term intensive folks, that's exactly what they're doing. And the EMDR is really a good example of that. And Al Pesso's work, you know, you recreate in a structure, you recreate the historical scene, the old bad that caused so much heartbreak, and then you juxtapose in a very embodied way what you would have wished, what you wish would have been back then. So you juxtapose what was with what you would have wished had been, and you do it in an embodied way. It's absolutely brilliant the way he does it, and it's a juxtaposition. It really is therapeutic memory reconsolidation, such that you unlock what had been the neural networks that were encoding the traumatic memories, and you lock in or reconsolidate an updated, more reality-based, more healthy narrative. And so that I've been working with that concept and realizing that on some level, I think that idea of creating mismatch experiences that by juxtaposing thesis and antithesis, whatever, to seemingly irreconcilable somethings, that the working through of which will enable you to evolve through iterative healing cycles to some kind of synthesis, which of course then has its own antithesis and problems. They have to work that through as well. That was way, I didn't mean to say all that, but I said it. So I said it. All right. So here's some more specific examples here. So destabilizing violations of expectation. So what's colored blue refers to something healthier, and what's colored red refers to something less healthy. So I'm going to try to put my money where my mouth is here and show you how in a sentence, I'm going to juxtapose something that will challenge and then support, increase anxiety, and then ease it. You know that your mother will probably never apologize. So these Model 1 conflict statements will tend to start with, I mean, you'll have your own variation, but you know that. We don't say, your mother will never apologize. We say, you know that your mother will probably never apologize. Now, you can't cheat. You can't say something that they don't know. But you can name something that they do kind of know, though they'd rather not it be named quite like that. So you increase their anxiety, but they do know that because you're addressing their internal conflict. Remember, their neurotic conflict, their internal conflict. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Yeah. I'm sorry. I meant to say the point of emotional urgency, and I didn't finish that sentence. Model 1, the point of emotional urgency is neurotic conflictedness. So that's a little bit of diagnosis, neurotic conflictedness. Model 2, the point of emotional urgency is narcissistic, there's the N, and narcissistic vulnerability, narcissistic woundedness, narcissistic injury, narcissistic entitlement. Model 3, it's noxious relatedness, when they're busy playing out all sorts of weird, unmastered, dysfunctional relational dynamics on the stage of their lives. Model 4, lifting from Arnie Modell, non-relatedness, affective non-relatedness, right? Schizoid, retreat, whatever. And model 5 is non-action. So when, right, so those 5, and they can be all happening, yes, at the same time. All right. So anyway, you know that your mother will probably never apologize. Now, how do they know that? Because they are 35 and they've had their mother for 35 years and their mother has never apologized. So they do know it. They'd rather not be naming it, but they do know it. You know, so anxiety provoking challenge, but you keep hoping that she will. Yes. So the first part sort of, they get anxious and you say, but you keep hoping that she will. You do it non-judgmentally, you do it with compassion, you do it thoughtfully, and you have to know them well enough to know how to say that second part. You challenge, and some therapists will just say, your mother's never going to apologize. And then they say, but no, I want her to. No, I think she will. I hope she will. I want her to. I hope she will. So what you do is you name it for them. so that they don't fight you, because this should be an internal conflict. There'll be time for knockdown drag outs in model 3, the intersubjective transference, countertransference, entanglements, where you really go at it. That's relational conflict, Stephen Mitchell's relational conflict. Model 1, stay out of it. It's not your problem. I mean, or as Freud would have said, the objectivity of a surgeon, or a blank screen, or whatever. So you want to name their internal conflict, their intrapsychic neurotic conflict. You know that your mother will probably never apologize, but you keep hoping that she will. That's model 1. Model 2, disillusionment, grieving. We want to facilitate their grieving. This has 3 parts. This is a little complicated, but I'll just sort of say it here. You had so hoped that Jose would leave his wife. I had hoped that, yes. But you're beginning to get it that probably he never will. I mean, they've been together now for quite some time and on the sly, and he's not leaving his wife. And that enrages and devastates you. So that's more an anxiety-provoking challenge, where you're encouraging them to confront and grieve the reality of what they're sort of coming to realize. Well, anyway, I'll go on this, but you see that I'm juxtaposing something less healthy, which is the you had so hoped Jose would leave his wife, with something more healthy, which is they do need to acknowledge they're beginning to get it, that probably the reality is he probably won't, and then they grieve, part of the grieving. I mean, this alone doesn't get all the grieving done, but this kind of thing is going to help the patient. It's a disillusionment statement. The first one's a conflict statement. Now for a relational intervention or an accountability statement. You had assumed that I too, like your father, would be critical. And they said, yeah, yeah. That's why I did a projective identification, because I was busy thinking you would be. But you're beginning to get it that not all relationships work that way. This is a pared down something, because in model 3, it's very difficult to give a sentence that captures the essence of what's happening in the intersubjective in between. But in essence, it boils down to, you would assume that I too, like your father, would be critical. And that's, yeah, they say, yeah. Mm-hmm. But the anxiety-provoking challenge is, but you're beginning to get it that not all relationships work that way. And in fact, that sometimes it's you've done something that will elicit that response. But again, I don't say all that, but I'm trying to give you a sense of juxtaposing 2 things here. Model 4, a facilitation statement. A part of you longs to be seen, heard, and understood. And that's the anxiety-provoking challenge. Unless they've evolved to a certain stage where that's the anxiety assuaging support. So it depends upon where they are in the treatment. But let's say in the moment earlier on, there is a part of them that longs to be seen, heard, and understood. And meanwhile, they're not talking too much, and everything they say is so obscure that you really do have trouble understanding it. So though a part of them longs to be seen, heard, and understood, they're just mumbling and not really telling you anything. And so, but another part of you is terrified of being found. And they say, yeah. Mm-hmm. Unless later in the treatment, it reverses. And they say, but I want to be seen, heard, and understood. And then we name, yeah, but there's another part of you that's terrified of being found, which is why you keep so much of yourself hidden. Anyway, and model 5, a quantum disentanglement statement. You hate your body and are convinced that nobody could ever find you attractive. That's an old bad narrative that they constructed early on in a desperate attempt to make sense of the messages that were coming their way. And that's their truth. Yep. You hate your body and you're convinced that nobody could ever find you attractive. I made a mistake here, actually, because quantum disentanglement statements actually are the one intervention, only group of interventions that start with I. Together, you work on these with the patient. And I did that wrong. So the patient will be saying, I hate my body and am convinced that nobody could ever find me attractive. That's a mistake. I got to change that. But I can envision a time when I might become more comfortable in my body, were I to commit to exercising more regularly and eating more healthily. That's the anxiety-provoking challenge. Anyway, I wanted to kind of give you a sense of what I mean by juxtaposing in order to create a mismatch experience repeatedly, judiciously, again and again, the working through of which is going to advance the patient ultimately from the one to the other. Now I'm going to do, let's see, do I want to do this? I want to leave, okay. Okay, as we've seen, anxiety provoking challenge will almost inevitably be a story about envisioning the enlivening possibility of something new, different, and better. Whereas the anxiety assuaging support will almost inevitably be a story about resonating empathically with the conditioned need for same old, same old. So model one, same sentence as before, you know that your mother will probably never apologize. And this is introducing the possibility of something more reality-based, what they really do know. And so they go, yeah, I guess so. And then you go, but you keep hoping that she will. You're resonating with the need for same old, same old. And they say, yeah, I do. I keep hoping. That's the one that eases their anxiety. Model two, you'd so hope that Jose, he would leave his wife. Yep, resonating with the need for same old, same old. Yep, they keep hoping. But you're beginning to get it that probably he never will. And that both enrages and devastates you, which introduces the possibility of something more reality-based. And sort of like what they do, okay, and they don't like that. You'd assume that I too, like your father, be critical. Yep, the relational expectation of same old, same old. Yep, I did. But you're beginning to get it that not all relationships work that way. And it's sort of, oh, do tell. No, really, possibility of something more reality-based. Model four, part of you longs to be seen, heard, and understood, introducing the possibility of a healthier way of relating. But another part of you is terrified of being found, resonating with their defensive need for same old, same old. And finally, I hate my body and am convinced that nobody could ever find me attractive. And that's very comfortable for them to say. That's what they live with. But I can envision, this makes them more anxious, the possibility of a new, different, and better narrative. All right. Okay, so now let me give you some, I have a page of each. And then let me just see, I want to see, because I want to time myself right here. Let me just see. Okay. So, all right. I did something wrong here, but you don't need to trouble yourself with that. All right. So model one, optimally stressful conflict statements, where you create a destabilizing juxtaposition of their adaptive capacity to know with their defensive need to resist that knowing. I'm going to read these three, but then I would like one of you to be bold enough that you'll give for all of us. Oh, I see, but can we record this? Can we record this? People, I guess if you're willing to be recorded, okay, because you'll be recorded if you talk. So, and some people will be willing, I hope. So you'll say the first half, and we'll come up with the second half of a conflict statement. These are really, really interesting, helpful interventions. Here we go. You know that if you're ever to get on with your life, you'll have to let go of your conviction that your childhood scarred you forever. But it's hard not to feel like damaged goods when you grew up in a horribly abusive household with a mean and nasty mother who kept telling you that you were a loser. So you know that if you're ever to get on with your life, you'll have to let go of your conviction. That's going to be hard for them to do. They have a conviction that their childhood scarred them forever, which means they don't have to take responsibility for doing anything differently. And now you resonate with, but it's hard not to feel like damaged goods. And you're using words that they've said when you grew up in a horribly abusive household with a mean and nasty mother who kept telling you that you were a loser. Say, yeah. All I ever heard was that I was a loser. And then I say, well, you know, if you ever get on with your life, you're going to have to let go of that conviction. You're going to have to get over it that, you know, all you are, that was then, this is now. I mean, so this is the beginning of just back and forth, helping them to get a little more clarity about cognitive understanding, cognitive dissonance between what they have the adaptive capacity to know, which is they will have to let go of their conviction, but their defensive need to protest. Yeah, but you know, it's hard for me not to feel like damaged goods because I grew up in a horribly abusive household with a mean and nasty mother kept telling me that I was a loser. You're coming to understand that your anger can put people off. And you can't cheat. You can't say that to somebody who has not come to understand that. But let's say they're beginning to get it, that they don't have any friends. And they come in and they complain. And they say, you know, I don't know, maybe there's something I'm doing that puts people off. So you say, you're coming to understand that perhaps, throwing a lot of qualifiers, perhaps, possibly, whatever. Or you could say a part of you coming to understand, to appreciate that perhaps your anger is kind of putting some people off. But you tell yourself, and I hope you can feel in that, that's a kind of defense of something. You tell yourself that you have a right to be as angry as you want because of how much you've had to suffer over the course of the years. And they go, you betcha. Yeah, you betcha. I have a right to be as angry as I want. Now, we know that that's probably not the most healthy way to react, to be in relationship, but that's the thing that gets in the way. Are you raising your hand there? No, you're not. Okay. And then a third one. You know that if your relationship with Alana is to survive, you'll need to take at least some responsibility for the part you're playing in the incredibly abusive fights that you and she have been having. But you tell yourself that it isn't really your fault, because if she weren't so provocative, then you wouldn't have to be so vindictive. I mean, you can have some fun saying these things, admittedly. All right. All right. So I want to know if somebody's going to be brave enough to give us the first half, and then the first three words will be, you know that. So let's construct the first half. You know that. And what do they know? As a result of the work you've done with them, as a result of the insight, the awareness that they've acquired, what do they know? You know that if you continue to smoke, that eventually you, like your mother who got cancer, that you're going to get cancer. You run the risk of getting cancer of your lungs. You know that. So what might they know? You know that. Well, let's see, not a lot of activity here. I'm not going to embarrass anybody yet by calling on you. So maybe, let's see, no hands. If you were to raise the hand, right, they'd be put up to near the front, I guess. All right, well, then we're not going to have you do that. We'll have Q&A at the end, and I'm going to go on to model 2, disillusionment statements, and so on, because I think maybe that's more better. Okay, model 2. Disillusionment statements, destabilizing juxtaposition of defensive need for relentless hope with adaptive capacity to confront the reality of disillusionment and adaptive capacity to grieve and evolve to a place of acceptance. I know this is a lot, and you'll have a chance. I mean, I've written them out, and you'll have a chance, obviously, from what Bill was saying, to study these and sort of think about if some of them will and can be applicable for you in your work. You had so hoped that I would tell you what to do, but you're beginning to realize that I don't simply give the answers, and it infuriates you. Could you imagine saying that to somebody? Some nods here. I'm looking, well, not so much. I'm getting one nod here, 2 nods, 3. Well, the third nod was my own. All right, well, all right. You had so hoped that your daughter would reach out to you when you were sick, but you're beginning to realize that for now, you are not a top priority for her, and it's a devastating loss. You would so have wished that I could know what you were, excuse me, thinking without your having to say it. Sorry. But you're coming to see that it does not always work this way, and that breaks your heart. You had so hoped that we could have a personal relationship, but you're coming to realize, albeit reluctantly, that a therapy relationship is not really about friendship per se, and that breaks your heart. So can you at least see how we're trying to facilitate their grieving by juxtaposing their sort of still need? You had so hoped we could have a personal relationship. Yeah, yes, I had hoped that. I wanted that. But now I'm addressing their adaptive capacity. But you're coming to realize, albeit reluctantly, the reality that a therapy relationship is not really about friendship per se. That's the reality of their disillusionment. And now you resonate with the pain of their heartbreak, and that breaks your heart. Okay, so model 3 accountability statements. Now you're destabilizing juxtaposition of defensive need to reenact, right? The defense in model 3 reenact with adaptive capacity for accountability. That's the adaptation. I wonder if this feeling I have in relation to you, that no matter what I say, it won't be good enough, is like the feeling you have spoken of having had in relation to your father, for whom nothing was ever good enough. That's yeah, I'll go with that. That's not as obviously a juxtaposition, but it is sort of focusing in on that they have done unto you what their father had done unto them. I wonder if this feeling I have in relation to you, that no matter what I say, it won't be good enough, is like the feeling you have spoken of having had in relation to your father, for whom nothing was ever good enough. It occurs to me that we have managed to recreate in here the very same dynamic that had characterized your relationship with your double binding father, namely the feeling we both have that no matter what either of us might do, it wouldn't get the other's approval. But all of this, frustrating as it is, gives us an opportunity to experience firsthand how toxic the relationship with your father really was. Except that now we can do something about it. Again, that's less obviously a juxtaposition. I mean, I can sort of feel it as a juxtaposition, but that's a kind of model 3 accountability statement. Finally, oh, this is Christopher Bolus. Oh my God, beautiful. You tell me something about yourself. And again, remember, the focus is on the intersubjective space between. It's a two-person, two relational subjects interacting and often conflicting. You tell me something about yourself. I'm just in the process of digesting it and storing it for further understanding of you. And then along you come, wham, and tell me that what I've digested and stored inside me did not come from you at all. The problem I find is how to live with the despair I feel occasioned by your disappearances. Ah, is that incredible? Kit Bolus on that one. Incredible. All right, model 4. The adaptive capacity to long for authentic engagement with defensive need to retreat from moments of meeting. A part of you yearns to be seen, known, understood, but another part of you is terrified of being found. You feel desperately lonely and disconnected from people and would wish you could feel that you belonged somewhere. But you find yourself holding back for fear of being devastatingly disappointed and left once again with a shattered heart. A part of you desperately wishes that you could find joy in being alive, but another part of you is so overwhelmed with despair about the absurdity of it all that you cannot imagine ever being able to experience anything even remotely close to genuine happiness. A part of you longs to have a partner with whom you could share what you hold most dear and could spend the rest of your life. But another part of you cringes at the thought of putting yourself out there. It just feels too risky to open your heart to possibilities. There's not a chance in hell that you're ever going to let yourself be hurt ever again, like the way you'd been hurt early on. Model 5. Okay, defensive need to remain entrenched in same old with adaptive capacity to their 3 parts: envision possibilities for something new, different, and better, take ownership of the need to change. Remember, this is about analysis paralysis and about repositioning yourself in relation to your life, and commit to action in alignment with something new, different, and better. And again, the short-term intensive folks do a sort of better job of this than the more psychoanalytically oriented folks do, I think. Even though my right brain is terrified, so some of my students came up with these, and one of these is from one of my patients. Even though my right brain is terrified of driving because I can't shake the memory of what had happened when my father was driving drunk and we had a terrible accident and I vomited because I was so incredibly upset. My left brain knows that if I drive carefully and pay close attention, then there's no need for me to be afraid because I am a good driver and am always very careful. Even though I generally assume that people will be critical of me because my parents were so unrelentingly judgmental, I can envision the possibility that someday I might be able to free myself of my self-consciousness and take more ownership of my right to be here on this earth. That one was my patient. Even though I feel so alienated from everybody because I was never made to feel that I belonged when I was a kid, I can envision the possibility of someday being able to feel less alienated. I take ownership of my need to put myself out there more, and I hereby commit to being more actively engaged in my life going forward. Okay, now, as we sit, now I couldn't help myself. I did add a few slides to what you all have. So I'm certainly willing to send you, I'll send Bill an update, and Dr. Tyne, an updated version of my slides, because some of these are a little bit newer. I couldn't help myself. My ideas are so busy evolving that, I mean, I sent this in like 2 days ago, and I've sort of done further thinking since. As we sit with our patients, there's always tension within us as well. Dialectical tension between, on the one hand, our vision of who we think the patient could be, were she but able, willing to make healthier choices. And on the other hand, our respect for the reality of who she is. So just as there's a dialectical tension within her between the less healthy, defensive need, the sobering reality of what is, the embracing of that, and the more healthy ability to envision the enlivening possibility of something new, different, and better, what could be, so too in us, we have a parallel dialectical tension between our vision of who we think the patient could be, who we just know the patient could be, were she but able, willing to make healthier choices. And on the other hand, our respect for the reality of who she is, and for the choices, no matter how unhealthy, that she finds herself feeling compelled to make. And one time I got so kind of balanced the wrong way, and was so into wanting my patient to do what I thought was the wiser something, that finally the patient had to say to me, sort of like, Martha, I come here because, I have a problem about that, and I'm trying to work on it. I said, touche, okay, my bad. Sorry about that. All right, we are therefore, always struggling to find, but again, if you make mistakes, it doesn't matter. You're just ever busy negotiating at Darlene Ehrenberg's Intimate Edge. You acknowledge stuff. My God, sorry, I went too far on that one, didn't I? I've actually said to patients, I said to a patient, I was trying to shame you with what I just said, but I see that I didn't really succeed. I said to one of them the other day, I was trying to make you feel guilty, but for some reason it didn't work. And then we can just both laugh. But again, there's something kind of useful in saying something like that, because you're really highlighting that something they're doing just really is kind of problematic. We are therefore always struggling to find an optimal balance within ourselves between wanting the patient to change and accepting the reality of who she is. Okay, A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose by Eckhart Tolle, or Tolle, I don't know. Tolle writes, and I think this is a story about kind of optimal stress and other things too, many other things. He's amazing, of course. After two ducks get into a fight, which never lasts long, they will separate and float off in opposite directions. Then each duck will flap its wings vigorously a few times, and I've added, as if to process the internal tension, thus releasing the surplus energy that had built up during the fight. After they flap their wings, they will float on peacefully, as if nothing had ever happened. And I really do feel that, in Model 3, negotiating at the Intimate Edge and really getting into it it's kind of incredible. It's authentic, it's real. And you have to have integrity, and you yourself have to hold yourself accountable for when you do stuff. And so, oops, my bad. You have to be willing to acknowledge that, because how can we be expecting our patients to acknowledge their bad if we ourselves can't acknowledge ours? Tolle goes on to write, we are a species that has lost its way. Everything natural, every flower or tree, and every animal have important lessons to teach us if we could but let ourselves stop, look, and listen. Our duck's lesson is this: flap your wings, let go, and return to the only place of power, the present moment. So process, integrate, and move on. Stronger for having had the stressful experience and transcended it. Just a few more slides and then a little time for Q&A. The purpose of psychotherapy, Rollo May, is to set people free. Other purposes too, but I love that one. Our patients can indeed be set free if we but have the courage to offer them optimally stressful interventions that will provide both impetus and opportunity for them to advance through iterative healing cycles of disruption in reaction to our challenge and repair in response to our support and synergy by tapping into their innate ability to self-correct in the face of optimal challenge to repair at ever higher levels of resilience and adaptability, such that they will need no longer to have the need to curse the darkness, because they will now have the capacity to light a candle. So optimal stress, stronger at the broken places. Is there not a certain beauty in brokenness, a beauty never achieved by things unbroken? If a bone is fractured and then heals, the area of the break will be stronger than the surrounding bone and will not again easily fracture. Are we too not stronger at our broken places? And is there not a certain beauty in brokenness, a quiet strength we acquire from surviving adversity and hardship and mastering the experience of disappointment, heartbreak, and devastation? And then, when we finally rise above it, don't we rise up in quiet triumph, even if only we notice? Finally, this wonderful poem by Christopher Logue, Come to the Edge, an evocative poem, captures the essence of our capacity to adapt to stress when push comes to shove. Come to the edge, we might fall. Come to the edge, it's too high. Come to the edge. And they came, and he pushed, and they flew. Second to last slide. We see a little girl with these sweet little girl with little angel wings. Erin Hansen, EH. What if I fall? Oh, but my darling, what if you fly? And finally, so she took the leap and built her wings on the way down. And I think that that's it. Yes, this is Stuart and his brother Stuart. They actually have them. They're over there. Stuart and his brother Stuart. I know they have the same name, but it is what it is. And if you have any questions, whatever, you can always email me. So some of you who might feel a little too shy to ask here, you can email me at marthastarkmd@hms.harvard.edu, and I will respond. Give me a few days maybe, but I will respond. And here's some references, and that's it. So let me stop share, and here I am. So that's it. And so I guess we stop recording, I guess is the thought here. And thank you, Greg. I see part of Greg's head.